We have, and I'm sorry to do this to you again, Drew, but we have another John from Ohio.
There'd be an H in the name.
There is an H in the name, so that makes it a bit easier. Hi, John. You're on with John and Drew. You're saying here that Christianity has it wrong about the afterlife, and you can prove it. There's no mind-body dualism. Without that, there is no Okay, come on. Let's hear this.
Okay, great. This is awesome. I love it. I can't wait to prove it. Okay, so, all right. So mind-body dualism states that there are separate entities, the mind and the body, and the mind is a separate substance from the body. I can prove that the brain is the source of consciousness. First of all, there is a structure in the brain. There was an experiment which was done where researchers stimulated this part of the brain called the claustrum, and that caused immediate unconsciousness in subjects. Okay, so that kind of indicates that that consciousness is a property of the brain which can be turned off. And also, there is another experiment which was done, which the researchers were able to actually see memories being formed. And that's another piece of evidence that consciousness and mental processes are properties of the brain and not anything else. Because if you're able to see neurons being formed as you learn, then how could you argue anything else that this is a process of the brain?
Right.
So those are two pieces, and I was just wondering what you thought of that.
Drew, you go. My brain is fried.
I have a clarifying question, if I may, John, with the H. So educate me a little bit here. Okay. Take me by the hand. Help me see where you're at. Okay. So mind-body dualism, right? So the mind and the body are distinct entities. So you're talking about, though, how consciousness is a product of the brain. So are you proposing, or are you because I've seen versions of dualism over the years, over the decades, studied it to some degree, but it's been a little while. It's been a good decade since I've really looked at it closely. But so are you suggesting that the mind as a separate entity from the body and the consciousness being a product of the brain, which is part of the body, are you suggesting that this mind part is separate from consciousness? Or where is the mind? Connect that for me, or disconnect it.
No. What I'm saying is that the mind is a process that the brain does, in the same way that digestion is a process of the stomach and the intestines. It's
like how sight is the process of the eyeballs.
What was that?
He's equating it.
Yeah, I'm just another equivalence where sight is like the process of the eyeballs.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Would it be similar to that, John, where sight is a process of the eyeballs, consciousness and the mind are a process of the brain.
Mm-hmm. Sound
digestion
and hearing
is a process of the digestive system.
The ears.
Right. It's the same thing as the stomach. The process that the stomach carries out is digestion, whereas the process that the brain carries out is consciousness and mind.
So are you saying that consciousness, okay, here's, I guess, part of the distinction that I'd like you to suss out for me, just because I'm just trying to absorb what your position is. Because again, there's lots of forms of dualism. I've seen most of the forms of dualism I'm more familiar with from a Christian or theistic lens. So I'm just trying to take time to really see where I see you're coming from, rather than cornering you in a box or arguing against something that you don't necessarily believe. But so So the mind is a process produced by the brain that is distinct from the body. So,
right.
I don't know. I guess I'm struggling to see the significance. I'm tempted to say, okay, digestion is separate from the body. It's not the body itself, but it still happens and it's still real. Well, no, I'm tempted. I don't mean this disrespectfully. Well, let me just finish my comment, and I have a question for you. I do want to hear your thoughts. Just let me get this question out first. It's a clarifying question. So I'm tempted to say, okay, who cares? What I want you to do is make me care. Further clarify why it matters. Help me care.
But you see, if consciousness is a process which is carried out by the brain, then it follows logically that when the brain dies, consciousness stops.
Right, and I'm fully on board with you there, but I don't know how that then doesn't prove enough, disprove. Well, just let me get there as well. Doesn't disprove an afterlife, because I'm pretty certain that in the belief structure, and not that I hold this, and I could be wrong, but when people believe that they die, it's not that their mind lives on forever. It's that this soul that they believe is in the body is what lives on forever. Nothing to do with mind and processes. It's like a separate entity that they believe is inside them that moves on. I don't believe in a soul, and I don't, but it's up to the theists to prove that that's what happens and goes on. I kind of feel like I know where you're going with this, but I just some clarification on it would be helpful.
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
So if you look at what is the definition of a soul, which I have looked at, all of the characteristics which theists describe as being characteristic of a soul, those are processes of the brain. Those are processes of the mind, and it's processes of the mind, which is carried out by the brain. So, so what I'm saying is there is no such thing as a soul. Because all of the processes, all of the things we can attribute to a soul are actually processes of the mind, which is carried out by the brain.
Right. And I'm going to say that I'm fully with you. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm not convinced that there's a soul. So I don't really see a need for that. But if you think you have a way of disproving a soul, I would write some papers and I would start submitting them, because you could be onto some absolute groundbreaking stuff that may not have been spoken about before.
Well, okay. I'm so excited to share my views with you guys. Okay, I don't have to write papers because papers have already been written. I'm not a
there you go.
scientist. So I'm not going to write a paper, but that's okay because papers have already been written. Number one, the paper about how the claustrum, if you stimulate the claustrum electrically, it shuts off consciousness, and then when you release that stimulation, the consciousness returns. So, doesn't that tell you that consciousness is produced by the brain if you can shut it off just by stimulating a certain part of the brain?
Yes. You are, I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I feel like you're talking to the folks who all kind of already agree with you. My suggestion would be something like this. Take this to a theist call-in show.
Yeah. Along with that, John, to both of the Johns, I agree. If what? Yeah, John, if you're
it's more comfortable for me. I'm sorry. I just want to say it's more comfortable for me to preach to the choir.
Well, that's fine. If we're here to help you with that, great. I'm all for
Absolutely. If you're, and maybe I didn't quite grasp the original setup of the call. If you're calling to, which now it sounds like this was the point of the call. If you're calling to convince us or give us, evidence that when a human dies, their consciousness dies with them? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I already believe that. I believe,
right, that's right.
I don't have a paper per se, but I believe Dan Dennett has written on that. I mean, several things. It's been well established in my mind that, now the term dualism is what threw me off, because I've heard that term used primarily in other contexts. So that's maybe something to keep in mind, is sometimes some of those fancy sounding words, philosophical, sometimes they can carry baggage for various audiences that you don't anticipate. For me, it carried some baggage that tripped me up. But no, I think we're all on the same page. I agree with you. Yeah,
I'm sorry, John. I just muted you ever so slightly just to let Drew get that out, but carry on.
Okay. No, here's the last thing. Okay. So the colostrum, when you stimulate it electrically, consciousness shuts off. Scientists have been able to see memories being formed. And also, my last point, which I'd love to get out, is that there was actually a 60 Minutes show which these researchers were able to they showed the subjects different objects, and they recorded their brain activity while viewing different objects, and then they were able to, without knowing which object the person was viewing, they were able to guess 96% of the time which object the person was viewing. So,
right.
I mean, I don't even know why you guys have a show, because if consciousness is produced by the brain, then theistic belief is over.
I'll tell you why, John, because it's fun.
By the brain, and so when the brain dies, consciousness stops.
Right.
And so therefore, there can't be a soul in an afterlife. So that's just a fiction.
Yeah,
and I understand why I understand why the writers of the Bible wanted to promote this idea, but those people were not neuroscientists. Okay. They didn't know what we know today.
Right. And I'm okay. I mean, I'm glad that we managed to give you a platform to vocalize this, but I do feel like you're maybe in a position now to go and take this to some believers and say, look, this is what I've found out. What do you think about that? Because we're all like, okay, yeah, the brain shuts off, and we all agree with you, John, to some degree. We're all there.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, how could anybody justify theistic belief after that? You could see my chain of logic there, that consciousness is produced by the brain. So therefore, when the brain dies, consciousness stops. And so there's no soul and no afterlife. So how could anyone believe in Christianity? That's my point.
I mean, that then it becomes a huge jump, because there are also like a ton of other religions that people still believe in, regardless of whether or not there's an afterlife or no afterlife or any of that. So, I mean, I'm with you on the brain activity side of it. I'm not necessarily with you on the, well, then that means Christianity's dumb. I feel like it is, but you know what I mean. I'm not agreeing with it for that reason.
Well, I mean, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I see it as a clear chain of logic. Okay.
Right. And that's great. But I honestly do. I rather than rehashing stuff, because we've got one more call that we do want to get to. I think what you've got is some great stuff there, John. And I really implore you to go and take it to some believers.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, John.
All right.
John with an H.
Thank you guys for letting me air my views.